Good afternoon, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, Lauren. It's Friday, April 16th, 2021. Sun is kind of shining, but it is getting warmer, but today is actually cold. And I'm from Minnesota. I know you spent some time in Michigan. We could probably talk about the weather all day.
we could.
That's a big topic. You're like, the weather.
How lucky we are to be in beautiful New York City. Although right now it's a little cloudy, but it's getting warmer. Spring is almost here.
Getting warmer. There's buds on the trees. It is awesome. And I know we have a lot to talk about. And if it's not already painfully apparent to the audience listening, Lauren and I actually know each other quite well. So some of my guests I've never met. Some of my guests I've maybe spent an hour or two, and some of the guests, like Lauren, for example, I've spent likely hundreds of hours with. We haven't never counted. And no, we're not dating or anything like that. We just happen to know each other in a specific community and spent a lot of time working together and just getting to know each other. So Lauren, I am really glad you're here because we've been talking about this for about a year. So you're finally making it happen. And with that, I would love, Lauren, if you would introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, a little bit about yourself and where you are in the world.
Yeah. And Jason, thanks so much for having me. I've been loving this podcast, and so it's exciting to be here. But my name is Dr. Lauren Borden. I am an executive coach in private practice in Manhattan, actually technically Brooklyn. I moved to Brooklyn, so I can't say that anymore. But I specialize in working primarily with women, but really mainly with any person who is looking to up-level their leadership and bring more authenticity and creativity to the work that they do. I'm also a meditation teacher. So a lot of the work that I do ends up being kind of in that space and bringing some of that expertise in listening to your intuition, listening to your authentic voice, bringing your authentic style to your work to my clients. And aside from that, living in Brooklyn, let's see, I'm learning to play guitar, which Jason and I have been talking about a lot. I am completely addicted to yoga. So I've been spending a lot of time in quarantine doing a lot of yoga, which is also a stress relief mechanism. And I'm obsessed with Jason's new puppy, which I will probably casually weave in throughout the conversation because is it Sunny? I'm obsessed with Sunny.
Her name is Sunny, and it doesn't have to be casually. We can just weave it in because, like, let's be honest, for everybody listening, they want to hear about cute puppies. Like, who doesn't want to hear about a cute puppy?
Yeah. And y'all, this is not just like, I think most puppies are cute. This is like a poster puppy. This is the kind of puppy that's on, in commercials and it like goes viral on the internet. This dog is so cute. So
well, I'm glad you brought that up, Lauren. If you or anybody listening to this episode knows anybody that can get our dog to go viral so we can make a lot of money off our dog, I am all about that.
I haven't been telling you this. When you post something really cute, I've been sending it to, like, I have a couple of dog Instagrams that I follow and I just will casually forward it to them.
That's awesome.
You need to see this. And I've never gotten a response, but one of these days it's going to happen. We're going to make Sunny go viral.
I mean, I really think that it's, she's almost 4 months old now. It's time for her to start earning her keep around here. She's got some vet bills. She's got, she eats a lot. It's not cheap to have a dog, as I know you've had dogs. Like, she needs to earn her keep and she needs to pay her way around here. She's old enough now. So, all right. So for anybody listening, if you know of any connections to get our dog, Sunny Rain Frizzell, to go viral and make money for us, I am all about that. I do want to share one thing, Lauren. Did you know that we got Sunny at the end of February? She was 7 pounds. She's now 26 pounds. She's quadrupled in size in less than 2 months.
Retriever dogs are crazy. They will just grow. They grow like weeds. And the way you can tell is by looking at their paws. And I feel like Sunny's paws were pretty big. So they're pretty big. They're pretty big. Yeah. But she's a good girl. So we'll talk about her throughout this episode. We'll call this my guests today are Dr. Lauren Borden and Sunny Rain. And Sunny.
All right. So I got some questions for you. Are you ready, Lauren?
I am.
And I was chatting with Lauren before we started. I asked her if I could call her the good doctor this entire episode. And I think we both decided that might not be a good idea.
There's nothing weird about that. Nothing weird about that, Jason.
No, nothing. Dr. Borden. No, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to call you Lauren. So Lauren, what's something that you nerd out about?
What is something that I nerd out about? I was thinking about this. I was like, what what I nerd out about a lot of things because
I know
nerds
you
are
do.
my favorite kinds of people. They're, it's like people who just get excited about stuff. And so for me, the first thing that comes to mind is actually personality and psychological assessments, which you and I could talk and talk and talk about. But I used to actually be, prior to becoming a coach, I was working in leadership development. I'll talk about this a bit later when I know you're going to ask me about my story. But
how do you know that? That's not for sure. You have no idea, except you might have an idea.
You gave me a little bit of a warning of what we'd be talking about. But I used to actually design assessments. So I used to design them. I used to validate them. And so I kind of lived in that world for a really long time. And I just really love like anything that you can use to help people understand themselves better. And like that I can use to better understand someone and better support someone. My most recent my low-key obsession, which you know about, has actually been human design, which I actually really probably shouldn't even call an assessment. It's really more of just like a personality framework. But I've been learning all about that. And just basically, I'm incredibly open to anything that you can use as a lens to look at yourself through. I know you're obsessed with StrengthsFinder, which I love.
I'm certified in 2 tools. I'm certified in DISC, specifically everything DISC through Wiley. So DISC isn't, I don't know if you knew this, and I didn't know this before I took the training, but a lot of people have taken DISC. DISC is actually open source. So the actual methodology is free, and then people will build products, which is why you can go do some DISC work with somebody like me, and it's through Wiley, which is a big publishing company. You can also go to Tony Robbins' website and take a free DISC assessment. It's because it's actually free. The actual, like the methodology behind it, and then people can build products on top of it. I'm certified in that. And yes, I recently got certified in Clifton Strengths, which used to be StrengthsFinder. And I also love Myers-Briggs. And I actually just recently got some Enneagram coaching as well. One of my friends got trained in the Enneagram. So I spent an hour and a half with her. It was enlightening because I've taken it, but I didn't know much about it. And then the human design stuff is beyond fascinating. I'm going to ask you more about that because I think it'll blow people's minds. And we'll actually talk. I will ask you specifically about that a little bit later in the episode.
Cool.
What is, do you identify as a nerd?
Completely. I'm 100% a Ravenclaw. If this were Harry Potter, I would be in Ravenclaw. I want to be a Gryffindor. Like I want to be brave, but no. I'm like very, very, I mean, I survived, 6 years in graduate school. You need to be a little bit of a nerd to enjoy that kind of an environment. But I had this realization the other day where I realized I'm reading 10 books right now, and they're all nonfiction. I have one, actually, that's not true. I have one that's fiction. I have all of the rest of them are nonfiction. And I was like, okay, this might be a new low. I need to find something, like someone just give me a fluff book, please. So yeah, I enjoy spending time in the intellectual realm for sure.
I think it also says a lot about your attention, about things needed to capture your attention span very quickly before you're like, what's the next book?
For sure. And then that's in my DISC, right? Is that part of my DISC?
Yeah.
Because I'm an I?
So we did some DISC, Lauren and I did some DISC work a few months ago. Yeah. You're a high I, and eyes are influencing thing. We want to be inspired. We want to have a vision for things. And we also have a short attention span for those sort of things. So we either want to be motivated quickly. And if we're motivated and we're into it, we'll take it till the cows come home. If we're not, and again, this is all stereotyping eyes and everybody's a little different, but if we're not inspired or motivated by something, forget it. And that is exactly how I am too. Like I need to be inspired. I need to be activated. I need to be interested. And if I'm not, I'm out. And this is how I was in school too. High school and college, I crushed classes that I liked. Like I really liked English. I liked social studies, crushed them. AP classes, A's, things like accounting and math. I'm like, I could care less. I got like C's. I can't get myself interested in things I'm just not passionate about, which is a very I thing.
Yep. That sounds about right. Well, and then the benefit I think of being that way and then also being a coach is that you take that to your clients, and it's like, you want to know what actually lights them up, because I feel like both of us, and we both have this where we'll be talking to someone, and if they're going through the okay, I'm going to do this goal and then this and this and this is going to happen. Like, and there's no passion and there's no heart in it. We both have a radar for that. And we're both like, like, no, I want to know what's going to get you fired up and out of bed in the morning. And like, yeah. So it has its benefits.
This feels like a bit of obligation. Like, it feels like you're saying this because you think it's the thing that needs to happen or obligation. That is not a powerful motivator for any human being that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so many people try to motivate themselves from there.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't have discipline. I'm like, there's no fire. You don't even, where's your pulse? I can't find your pulse. Let's get you a pulse first, and then we'll worry about discipline.
I'm laughing about this because I literally talked to I had a session with my coach, who you also know, my coach. And the best thing that happened to me in the last month was when the IRS said, hey, taxes aren't due till May 15th, because it's actually like my worst nightmare. I don't do my own taxes, but even just like pulling the information, I just could care less. Like, I know to me, it's just like purely a thing that has to be done. And no, I haven't done it. And now it's April 16th because I'm like, yes, procrastinators unite. This is the least inspiring thing I could do, is go pull a bunch of paperwork and send it to an accountant to put it into a form. So this is totally me. And I have committed to getting it done this weekend because I don't want to think about it anymore. And it does need to happen. And I'm not inspired by it. So I'm going to be grinding. I'll be grinding through it, and it will not be pretty.
Do you need any accountability around that, Jason?
Actually, yes, I do. I actually have accountability around it with somebody else, but I will be beholden to you as well.
Okay. I'll pass.
All right. And Lauren, in reverse, when are you going to finish one of those 10 books?
I actually went, that was a thing. I was like, I cannot add anything else to this list until I cross them off. So I finished Playing Big. I'm almost done with How to Do the Work by Nicole. I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's Lapura. She's the holistic psychologist it's really good. And then I've just got a few others that I've just got to cross off, but I need to finish at least 3 before I add one, basically.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good move. You may want to talk to your coach about that.
I'm for sure going to bring that to her. Yes.
All right, Lauren, what, I'm going to talk a little bit about comfort zones. I know you know this question. You know you know what I mean in the context of this question about your comfort zone. So what is something that is inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's, besides reading 10 books at once and spending 6 years in postgrad?
Yeah. And spending 6 years, there was that was actually really not in my comfort zone. There's nothing,
I can imagine
fun about that, but no, that's not true. I could talk actually for quite a bit of time about what I got out of that experience, but something that's inside of my comfort zone and outside of someone else's. I do a 10-day silent meditation retreat every year. So I go into the woods and I basically take a vow of silence and am silent, meditating, no talking, no communicating. There's one woman in the camp who you can talk to, like if you have a,
you're dying,
mortal wound or something.
You're like,
Jason right now is like,
I'm pointing at my throat. I'm like, no, you can't talk. You like pull out a little chalkboard and write it on there.
Well, oh my gosh, I have stories about this. Like the first time I ever did it, we went and it was a completely life-changing experience. It was when I actually learned I wanted to be a coach, which I think I told you about, but that happened alongside also realizing that the camp I was at had bed bugs and we weren't allowed to talk. So I'm like, I know. So I'm like, full disclosure, like I was one of the ones who figured out we had bed bugs. And so I like said something and I was just like, okay, this is what needs to happen. It's a public health hazard.
Lauren, I have to do a mini improv scene with you. And I have to say the thing that popped in my mind is, and this is where I really started my charades career. And it's been going well ever since. Or my mime career. This is where I really learned how to use my entire body when I had bed bugs on my back and I couldn't tell anybody about it. That's so crazy.
I ended up miming. I mimed to my my roommate, which you're not supposed to do. That's still communication. You're not even really supposed to make eye contact, but this felt really important, Well, I think some people actually knew we had bed bugs because I had seen someone who looked like they'd been attacked by a mosquito or something, and was having like an allergic reaction. And everyone was basically looking at this one person thinking, hey, what's wrong? then I saw the garbage bags coming out, and then I go into my dorm and I pull my bed away from my wall, and I see these big piles of bed bugs in each corner of the room, at which point I'm like, okay, my roommate needs to know this. We need to figure out what we're going to do. So
sounds like a horror movie.
It was really, well, you know, what was wild about it was that it ended up creating for me one of the biggest breakthroughs I've ever had in my life, because I walked out, and these meditation retreats, you're meditating for 12 hours a day, and your butt hurts, your hips hurt, your mind is going crazy. I at this point had been meditating for a while, but I wasn't really that seasoned with it. And I mean, and heck, even if you are, 12 hours of meditation a day is a lot. And I kind of had this experience, and I walked outside, there was this meditation garden, and I'm walking around the meditation garden and thinking to myself, I'm catching myself thinking about like, okay, can I sleep in my car? What if I can find a tent? Like, I'll sleep outside. I'll gladly sleep outside. There's no problem, you know? And, you know, my brain starts going really crazy. I'm like, do I need to, like, what do you even do for bed bugs? Do I have to light my stuff on fire? Like, I'm being dramatic, but I caught myself in the thinking and just went, oh my gosh, this is the thing I do. This is the thing I do. Something happens. I make it really dramatic. I suffer through it. It becomes a reason to quit. It becomes a reason not to do the thing that I want. This is the mind drama that's making me exhausted. And yes, it's very intense because they're bed bugs, and that's very real. And what would it actually look like for me to go the rest of the 10 days and just be all in? And that's what I did. And thankfully, I apparently am not allergic to bed bugs because I didn't get any bites, and ended up having a really, really profound experience and just some really crazy, I'd never had those experiences before meditating before, where it's like out of body experiences, and really, really felt what it was like to just get my brain to really settle down and change my relationship to my thoughts. And that was really the beginning of a lot of really big changes in my life. So I do it every year now.
Yeah. So yes, that is definitely outside of what I would say most people's comfort zones. I want to tell you that is very impressive. And if I don't ask you this on the air, I'm going to forever. When you say all in, does that mean you just slept where the bed bugs were?
I did.
Oh my God.
Well, so they, you know, at this point, the people who are in charge were like, you know, getting the exterminator to come in, and they were looking at which rooms they were in. So there were dead bed bugs in our space, but no one in our space had actively had bed bugs. So at that point, you know, there's something very intensely psychological about going to bed at night being like, am I about to be eaten by a bunch of
I'm telling
bugs?
you, this is actually like a horror movie.
It is. Well, and it took this is what I'm saying, when it was like, when they say God has a sense of humor, it's like, you know, I just imagine, you know, source, God, spirit, whatever, some man in the sky, even if you don't believe in God, right? Like looking down and thinking, okay, all of these people are here. They're trying to, you know, get closer to the divine, discover their own divinity, and like get their minds to calm down. You know, what's really funny? Let's give them some bed bugs and see how they handle that. And so I had to use the stuff I was learning, like in the moment, to chill out, like, and be present. And I was really lucky. Like I didn't have anything. I came with minimal stuff. So I ended up I threw most of it out. I stopped by the car wash and was, you know, steaming my upholstery in my car, like all kinds of things to make sure it was a little funny. But
wow, this is, I had no idea. I know you went to the meditation retreat. I had no idea that there was the bed bug incident. And then all in, you're just like, yeah, YOLO. I'm laying in the bed. I'm laying where bed bugs might get me. That is quite outside almost everybody else's comfort zone. So this might be the best answer to this question I've ever received on the podcast. And this is like episode 75. That's what's inside your comfort zone is actually laying in a bed where you know there's bed bugs.
This is the thing, when people look at me and they're like, toughen up, Lauren, or you need to be more resilient. I'm like, oh, you don't know. Okay. Like you don't know. I can really be very, very resilient and tough and kind of get my mind right when I need to. But I look back on that and I'm like, oh my goodness, that really was half the women left. Like most people left. I was one of maybe 8 people left at the end who were in that dorm. So
it's like a really, really, really bad version of Survivor. Like, or like a non-lethal Hunger Games where you're like, we're gonna put you all. It's like an action horror movie where like we're gonna put you in this dorm together. You're not gonna be able to talk, and then we're gonna like actually drop bed bugs in here and see the psychological experiment.
It's a comedy. It's totally comedy. And I felt so, honestly, I felt so bad for the people who were running it too, because they, when you run an event like that, you put so much thought into it. And the Vipassana, it was a Vipassana organization, like Vipassana meditation, and like Vipassana in general, they're so thoughtful about where they place people. And it really was a really big fluke. It was a big fluke, but
I'm guessing they're like, hey, if you ever want to leave us a Yelp review, it would be really appreciated if perhaps you would leave off the bed bugs.
Leave out the bed bugs.
I had a transcendental. Or is it transcendental? I don't even remember that word. I had a transcendental experience, and I also left with a lot of bed bug bites.
Yeah.
Wow. This is really wacky. But yeah, I think I might give you the trophy, right? I'm going to give you the ribbon for probably the best example of an answer that's inside of your comfort zone is meditating for 10 days, not talking, and doing it with knowing there's bed bugs in your room. All right.
I'm so glad.
All right. You get the gold star. You high achiever, you. So
that's all I needed to know.
There you go. So what about the reverse of this? What's something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's?
I was outside of my comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's. I'm curious about what you think about this. This might be a really lame answer. I've been looking at growing my business, and like I think as a business owner, one of the things you think about a lot is marketing.
Yeah.
Big marketing campaigns and ads I'm realizing are like really outside of my comfort zone. So I'm like learning a ton there right now and really getting clear on this is a less fun answer. This is a much less fun answer, but I think a lot of business owners probably when they're in this space can like have this experience perhaps as they're getting started and they're learning about marketing and running ads and all of these things, transitioning out of a more a very personal dynamic in your business and then shifting out to having these big ads. Sometimes, it's this balance between this is part of my brand is relationship based, and now shifting out to scale and like build courses and all of these things. And how do you maintain that relationship orientation and that depth of connection with like basically across the internet. So that's been an edge for me. That's been something that I've been learning a lot. Do you run any marketing?
Do I do what?
Do you run any marketing? Like ads or anything like that?
This is so interesting that you're asking this question, because this is what I talked to my coach about this morning.
Oh, that's
this exact topic of my business is growing quickly, just like your business is growing quickly. And for those who are out there who work in this space, or really any space, like any entrepreneurial space, anything that you're kind of the person, you run into this thing where you're trading time for money and it doesn't really work anymore. I mean, it works. It is a portion of your business, but it's not going to get you to the next level. So what you're talking about is scaling through things like courses, that's more like passive income, group work, and all those. And I was talking to him about this, and I have all these lists of things that I actually, one, know how to do them. And two, I actually know how to execute. Like I know what the thing is, but I haven't executed it. And so that was my request, is like, what's the block for me? And I think, and I'll offer this to you, and I don't know if this resonates, but for most people, when they start their businesses, you get it through friends, family, referrals, you start to serve people, you do it, you have a good, what I'll call a product or a service. And then they'll send you back and they'll say, hey, like you should go talk to Lauren. She's my coach. She's really great. And then you kind of get a snowball of referrals, and that's great. And at some point you're not able to scale that because it's still one-on-one type stuff or even group stuff. And so what I came up with him, and I don't know if this is you, is, have you read the book, The Big Leap?
Not yet, but I think we talked about this a couple of days ago. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, we did.
And I'm reading 10 books. So it's
Okay, Lauren, do not read this book yet, or maybe replace it. I don't know. But he talks about this in the book about, he calls them upper limit problems, where as you move and you do bigger things, as humans, we always put something in the way. And you're like, oh my God, that's something I'm uncomfortable with. And it's probably an upper limit problem because you're actually at a place where you need that for your business to get to where you want to be. And the thing that's uncomfortable is, whoa, like I'm going to potentially impact and reach people who have no idea who I am. And that was what it was for me too, is because we're both people, right? Like we like to interact with people. We like to have close personal connections. And you're like, oh, somebody might hire me who only saw my website, or they might want to get on the phone with me, which for me is like, oh, how do I maintain the personal connection? How do I be authentic? And what I actually landed on, and I'll offer this to you, and I don't know if this resonates, is there's so much, and this is my opinion, there's so much of the coaching industry that is pure marketing and sales and no value behind it.
Yes.
And it's also great marketing. Like it's great. It lands, people like it. It attracts clients. So for me, the thing I struggle with is how do you do that holistically? How do you have good marketing? And I call it like slick marketing. Like it's slick, like it looks good. It's something that you want to engage with. How do you have a nice like sales process? And then how do you also deliver at a personal level? And I think there's a lot of experiences that people have where it's like slick marketing and then nothing on the other side.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Actually, I got so much out of what you just said, because I think that and I think it's amazing that there are so many coaches, and there are so many coaches, I think, who are doing, like, there's kind of someone for everyone right now, regardless of where people are in their journey. Sometimes I need to catch myself, right? Because even there are moments where I'm like, okay, this person has really fancy marketing, but I know the stuff on the back end and it's not that crazy. And, but some people need that. Like some people actually, that's exactly where they are in their journey. And that's exactly what they need. So, and I think there are so many coaches in the space right now who are so focused on marketing. And like, there is a little bit of like an imbalance in like, being an influencer and all of this stuff.
Right.
And then the flip side of that is, I think what I see from a lot of coaches who are coming out of really rigorous programs and like, who've really invested in their development, is they're not actually investing. They're actually like really riding on their skills and on their referral network, which is good, which is what we want. And so there's some balance there that I think needs to happen. The other thing I got as you were talking was when you were talking about, oh my gosh, the only thing they're going to see is my ad, and the only thing they're going to see is my website. My stomach clenched because I actually just realized, I was like, oh, how that is really vulnerable. Like that's actually really scary and vulnerable, because it's, that people are going to just look at your stuff and judge you. Whereas when there's a face-to-face thing, there's an element of control. So I'm like, I know that at the very least, if you sit in front of me and you're like, this person's not for me, like this is not the coach for me, it's because I'm showing up as me. And if you have a negative response to me, then we're not good matches.
Right.
We're not a good match. But if you just see some random interview or podcast or whatever thing, the various ways that we can show up on the internet, there's something about that actually feels more frightening. And that makes me want to, I have this impulse to go in and make sure all my branding and stuff is on point, which I know it isn't. So
there you go.
I don't know. It just reframed it. It reframed it a little bit for me where it was like, okay, how much of this is just a control thing?
Yeah. Maybe we can support each other with this, because we're kind of at the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally talked to my coach about this morning. So.
It's so funny. That's so funny that we're on the same wavelength.
Is it really that funny though, if you think about it?
It's not. What is
your Clifton strength of connectedness tell you?
Everything makes perfect sense.
Everything makes perfect sense.
Everything makes perfect sense.
All right. Lauren, we're going to talk a little bit about speaking. I know you do speaking, you do facilitation. Mm-hmm. You've done speaking in your current career. You did a lot of training and speaking in front of rooms in your past career. I'm sure you had to give, all sorts of presentations in your college career and all those things. You're a great speaker, good presence and all that. So this will probably be a question you'll enjoy answering. Some of my guests who maybe don't like speaking, it is a podcast. So most of my guests are like, oh, I like speaking, but every now and again, something I like being on a podcast. I do not want to speak in public. if I was to be able to give you a speech, if I was able to give you 5 minutes and you could deliver a speech to the whole world, what would you talk about and what would be your call to action for the audience?
I would talk about, I'm going to try really hard to be succinct here. I would talk about how I really truly believe, and actually have a lot of evidence for, research evidence, for this idea that empaths and highly sensitive people actually make the best leaders when you empower them. When they're healed and they're empowered, people who are very, very sensitive, maybe not very, very sensitive, but like who identify as like highly sensitive people, make very good leaders. And I believe actually would be a solution, or like their type of leadership, I believe would be an enormous solution to a lot of the problems we see in the world.
Wow.
Because I did my dissertation on actually the antithesis of empathy and being an empath and being sensitive, which is narcissism, arrogance, what we call the dark triad. So like darkness and arrogance in leadership. Many people would consider that to be the opposite. And I really believe that the environments that are created by that type of leadership actually would be kind of turned on their heads if you were able to empower empaths. And the problem is, I think in a lot of cases, empaths don't really feel very empowered to step into, like, they don't really feel held by those spaces and by those cultural environments. And by kind of giving them the tools to identify their vision and manage their emotions, and also, but not lose themselves. Like, you know, I think we even saw, not to make it political, but I think we saw a couple of examples of it. We've seen a couple of examples of it in people who have like run for office and who haven't made it like recently. But yeah, I think it's tremendously powerful. So the call to action would actually be, I think it starts with the way we relate to sensitivity. Most people relate to sensitivity as an enormous, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Just an enormous problem. Like it's an issue. It's too sensitive. And too sensitive, I actually believe isn't a thing. And it's actually very disempowering of what sensitivity is. And if we start to relate to it differently, if we start to relate to it as actually a superpower and as a strength and a particular type of strength, I think we'd see a lot of differences in the world. I think we'd see that, you know, people are more willing to be themselves. I think we'd see less, you know, shame in people when they actually have human moments. We'd see more vulnerability. We'd see more connection. That's what I would talk about. It would probably take more than 5 minutes, but that's what I talk about. No.
You don't understand the rules of this. I give you 5 minutes, and it's my 5 minutes to give you, and you get no more than 5 minutes. This is Jason's rule.
You're just gonna the Oscar classical music will be going off halfway through my speech.
Exactly. I will literally have the Oscar music ready to go. I'm just relating this. So you probably know this, and I can't remember this, or you're high in this, but in Clifton Strengths, there actually is one of the strengths is literally empathy is one of the 34 strengths. And the whole strengths methodology, you look at things as strengths, but each strength has a shadow. And what you just outlined is the shadow. So empathy is defined by Clifton Strengths as the ability to feel others' emotions and be with them in that. The dark side of that, according to Clifton Strengths, is that you give of yourself and you don't have anything left for yourself. And so that's what I heard you say is that, well, I was going to ask you, Lauren, I don't think we ever talked about this. Do you consider yourself an empath, or are you highly empathetic?
Yes. Actually, weirdly, I took Clifton Strengths recently. The last time I took it, I was really high. Empathy was really high, and this time it was lower for some reason. But
you're getting jaded. Yes. You're getting bitter and jaded in your old age.
I know. I guess maybe it's I don't know what I'd have to sit with that on why it shifted. But yes, I was totally, and I think I can see it. I can see it really clearly with the way, particularly when I look at how I was in school. And how I was in school, and how when like certain topics came up, or when certain like issues with other kids came up, I was so deeply affected by it. And the feedback I remember I always got was just toughen up, be tougher, like being too sensitive.
The world tells you, right?
And it's like, and I'm not even faulting the people who I think a lot of parenting and a lot of the world, it's like where we look at people who are sensitive and we say, hey, toughen up, because we don't want them to get trampled, right. Which is good and important. And I also think the goal shouldn't be to create a world where people aren't sensitive anymore. It should be to create a world where people can be sensitive without getting trampled. So, and like actually to relate to people who are sensitive, kind of like, the canaries in the coal mine that are setting off alarms saying, hey, like something's off here. Like this actually isn't okay. Yeah. So yeah, I totally see myself that way. I spent a really long time as a highly sensitive person or an empath, like trying not to be. So I think if you looked at me for the first, 20 years of my life, you wouldn't have known that. You would just say, wow, she's so analytical. She's really analytical and doesn't really lead with her emotions. And it was all happening under the surface. And I was just totally warring with it. Like,
and then it went,
don't feel
at some point.
Totally. And then I learned to empower them. And there was a little bit of a process of going into them where it got a little messy. But now I would totally consider myself to be that way. And most of my clients are too, actually.
Yeah. Empathic. Yeah. I want to spend a minute on this. And I know I'm interviewing you, but I want to actually ask you something, because you know me quite well. And I don't consider myself empathic in that I almost never take on anybody else's emotions. Like if you're crying, I feel for you, but I don't feel what you feel. Mm-hmm. And how I understand an empath would be like, I actually feel sad because you're sad. Mm-hmm. I feel for you. I feel that you're sad. And if it's something that makes you sad, I'm there with you, right? Like I'm there with you, but I'm not like wanting to cry generally. But on the other side of that, I have a lot of care for people. So I'm curious what you hear in that is like, I don't consider myself all that empathetic, but I consider myself somebody who cares a lot. So I guess, is that not empathetic because I don't actually feel the emotion, but so that's not empathy then in the way that we would define it, what we're talking about.
I would actually, so in terms of the quality that I'm looking to, that I think leaders need, what you're describing is absolutely part of it. So I actually think that's really, that's a really, really key quality. And I think that I would assert that in the way that a lot of our structures collectively work right now, in many cases, people like you end up in corporate environments and are told like to care less. Like there's a little bit of an implicit thing about caring less, and that you're more productive and you're more, and a lot of that stuff like can be true, emotions. It's not always great to be giving a presentation to the board and then spontaneously combust and like burst into tears, emotional regulation and emotional intelligence is really, really important. And that quality you're describing of care, even if you're not taking it on, I think is really, really important. The thing with empaths specifically, so an empath, and so for those of you who are listening who don't know what that is, it's a little bit more of what Jason was talking about, where it's like, I'm taking on, like, I really deeply feel what other people are feeling. And I think part of empowering empaths is actually teaching them boundaries and actually teaching them to like feel the stuff and honor where they're at, but also have boundaries and realize that you don't have to take on everything. And I think oftentimes the place that gets people can be more of one of care, sensitivity, but not to the point that you're taken out by other people's emotions or taken out by emotions in general. Like you can have your emotions and have these other things too, have productivity, have logic, have rational thought. Like your frontal cortex like doesn't go offline the way that it does when you're really taken out.
Yeah. I want to wrap with a couple things. So I'm actually looking at the Strengths Finders like toolkit right now. And I'm looking at empathy because I'm fascinated by this. So Clifton defines empathy as exceptionally talented in the empathy theme, can sense other people's feelings by imagining themselves in others' lives or situations. People that are high in empathy love the gladness, the sadness, the madness of humanity, and they hate those things that block or limit emotional expression. And that's what I heard at the very beginning of what you were talking about, your speech is limiting emotional expression is not healthy, especially for people that you're like actually stifling a core part of who somebody who's high in empathy is.
Yes. And I think that piece about how people who are empathic or empathetic, I'm using those two interchangeably and they're not, but people who are kind of high in this quality, because they have that low tolerance for things that block that authentic expression. Think about what's happening in the world right now with respect to diversity, inclusion, like issues related to race, sexual orientation, where people like really the thing that a lot of people are pointing to is, hey, we've got diversity, but we don't feel included. We don't feel like we can show up authentically. And I think that kind of low tolerance for things that block those things, like if that were more widespread, I think we'd see a lot of these things. And I mean, I'm oversimplifying it. They're definitely complex issues, but I think that we'd see a lot of these issues shift.
Yeah. Awesome, Lauren. Thank you very much. That was very enlightening. I got a lot out of that. So thank you. We're going to take a very brief commercial break and we'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Lauren, we are back from commercial break. So I think this is the part of the show where you may have had a hint ahead of time. So this is the part of the show where love to hear what you'd like the audience to know about you. So I leave this question very broad and open specifically for that reason. So what would you like the audience to know about you?
Oh man. Oh, you changed the question.
Yes, I did. I changed it last week because I wanted to make it even more open than I used. I used to ask, or I used to actually ask, tell us about your journey. And I think this is more broad because not everybody, the journey isn't always the thing for people. And I think it's interesting to the guest and it's more of this open. What do you want the audience to know about you?
Yeah. Man, that is a lot.
Besides that you love puppies.
Besides that, I love puppies.
And bed bugs.
I love puppies. less so bed bugs. I think just in terms of, I will actually kind of go into my journey a little bit.
Please,
it is all related. Like it's all related. Where, I think for me, I'm completely passionate about helping people grow. Helping people. And what that looks like specifically is helping people or not even help. I don't even want to say helping. Helping sounds like condescending, but supporting and empowering people to step into their whole selves and bring back parts of themselves that they've shed or that they felt like weren't enough or didn't fit with what they wanted to do. And really kind of embrace and step into their authentic selves. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because for a long time, just the way that my story has looked, I grew up with actually I think I've said this to you, Jason, like a list of learning disabilities as long as my arm, is what I like to, is how I like to say it. Like I had ADD. I had a very hard time focusing, all kinds of things in school. And as I got older, I learned, that there's a certain way that I need to be in the world to be successful. And I ended up getting a PhD. I ended up graduating at the top of my class. I kind of did all the things that I was supposed to do and had this experience of, oh, wow, this actually didn't make me happy. This actually isn't really fulfilling. And like, what's that about? Yeah. Shocking. But it's weird, like I kind of, you think like a lot of us relate to life. Like we're going to check these boxes and things will be great. And so I was working in leadership development for a really long time, ended up deciding to actually on that same fateful Vipassana meditation retreat, that's with the bed bugs, came out of it thinking, I think I want to be a coach, and happened to connect with somebody who was in the coaching industry, talked to them about that, started coaching in a corporate setting, and then really took a look, like through being a coach and also receiving coaching, kind of took a look at my life and said, oh, wow, like I've been choosing a lot of these things because I thought I was supposed to, like this is what success looked like. This is what leadership looked like. And really just went through this very intense process of redefining what that looked like for myself, redefining what my leadership looked like and how I could have all of it, how I could, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, bring my whole self to that process. Yeah. And so that's really what I do now. And I do it through a combination of coaching, supporting my clients with meditation, supporting them and really getting fully in touch with themselves, because most of us are walking around and we are actually very, very disconnected from who we are. Yeah. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from other people. And, yeah, so that's a bit about my story and why I'm passionate about why I'm passionate about. And also I think explain some of the pieces about, empathy and why I'm also really, really crazy about that. And like, passionate about that topic. And just bringing more of ourselves to our lives, basically.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So, there are coaches out there that are coaches because they want to be a coach and they don't have any training. And again, like, it's not to say that they're not amazing coaches. I would look at you as somebody on the other end of the spectrum. Like, you have a postgraduate degree that relates. It's a psychology, right? It's industrial psychology, isn't it?
Industrial organizational psychology.
Yeah. Right. So you have so let's just call it psychology. You're not a psychologist, but you probably could have been, right? And you have a PhD in that. And you're also somebody who has spent a lot of time working on your craft as a coach.
Yeah.
So I bring this up to you to say, I'm actually really curious about, and I don't think you know where this is going to go. I don't think this will surprise you, but I'm really curious to hear your opinion on therapy versus coaching. Because, and specifically in how it relates to things like meditation, spiritual work, because and I guess the question I have for you is how, when you have a client or you have a potential client, how do you know whether they should work with you or whether they should work with a therapist, or it's okay to work with both? Like, how do you delineate that in your practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Let me ask you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Have you ever run across somebody who wants to work with you and you're like, I can't work with you, you need a therapist?
Yes.
Me too.
For sure.
Yeah. Or you've started to work with somebody and you're like, oh, wait. Yeah. And you have to have the conversation. So yeah, I just love to hear your perspective as somebody that I respect and also has a lot of training and education around this and a lot of like ethical integrity too around this. Like, how do you see that, or how do you view that? That being therapy versus coaching?
Yeah, that's like a really good question. It's a really important one because what's interesting here is that, and this, you're in the ICF, right? The International Coaching Federation, which is the governing body for certified coaches. There's some coaches who aren't certified with the ICF, but or like aren't familiar with it. That should be a little bit of a red flag if they aren't. But but I'm saying that tongue in cheek. They're actually but the ICF defines that line very, very clearly. And until I had a conversation with someone last night about this, until I believe the 80s or 90s, coaches, it was like, there is coaching and we don't even talk about psychology. That is like, that line is a brick wall. And I think the more we start to understand humans, the more these lines have bled. Totally. The more that we start understanding trauma and all of these things, it's I believe, very, very hard to be a coach and steer clear of therapeutic issues entirely. Totally. It's just like not real. So in terms of the way that I am about that line in my own practice, some people relate to it as a brick wall. And I think that is very responsible when you do that. And that leaves this other space where it's like when a whole person shows up in front of you who wants these big things, wants to up level and like create all these amazing things in their life and their company and everything like that. And they're humans. So they've also experienced trauma that might get activated when they're jumping outside of their comfort zone. Right. For me, the way that I've navigated that process is by being really clear about the nature of our conversations and the nature of the work that we're doing together. And if there is therapeutic stuff in the space, what are the supports that they need for that, either from me but more so in other spaces?
Yeah.
Like how do we kind of co-create how we navigate that together? Are we completely steering clear of it? Are we saying, hey, like, what's your level of activation right now? Like, do you actually need a minute to not go so hard at work? And like, do you need to take some time for yourself? Like, what actually does this look like? And so much of that is happening in the conversation. But to your question about the way that it looks in the beginning, I think the best you can do really is explain the difference, have them experience to a degree what coaching is and what kind of conversations that you have. And if any of your spidey senses go up, I'm a really big proponent of people also being in therapy. Like I will say very clearly, I'm like, I actually think that being in therapy will expedite this process for you. Most likely.
Totally. Oh yeah.
Because it's like you're creating two different spaces. One is when you're going in and healing and you're feeling all the feels. And this is where we push you. Like, this is where, and that might even be an oversimplification, because there are totally times when it gets complicated. I mean, what do you think? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, I'm present to it. Also, I'm being a little bit, I have my own little agendas. I always have an agenda for myself in some way. Is I have a client right now that she's just not getting any movement. And we've had this conversation, and it's not about the coaching being good or bad, or her being a good or bad client. It's just about, she's got some stuff that it really isn't coaching related. I'm the same. And the thing that I love about coaching is, in partnership and in relationship, you can do almost anything. I mean, you can have almost any conversation. And so, as coaches, we develop deep relationships with our clients. It's like, hey, like, this sounds like this might be something that's a little more therapeutic. Have you seen a therapist? Do you have support for that? What do you see? As opposed to like, you need a therapist. Like, I would never be like, Lauren, you need a therapist. You're depressed. Get out of here. There's probably coaches who do that. And there's also probably coaches who are like, oh, you're depressed. Let's coach you out of your depression, which is just wildly dangerous.
Yeah, that is a thing. And that is wildly dangerous.
It's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing. I ran into a coach a couple of years ago. She called herself an emotional support coach for men. And I said, well, isn't that just pseudotherapy? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, what do you do? She's like, well, I'm with men and they get emotional and then we work through it together. I'm like, so that you're basically doing therapy. You're not a trained therapist. She's like, and she of course didn't like my line of questioning. I met her at a networking event. But so yeah, to answer, it's like the training that you and I have, and a lot of good coaches out there, we're trained to have this conversation. And I'll be the first to admit, it's still an edge for me, because there is a lot of gray area there. There's a ton of gray area. And the other thing I just wanted to say about this is this thing of like, therapy deals with your past. I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
like,
no.
And that's a really old, what I see as an old and outdated modality. And I still hear it all the time. And it still gets trained that way. I'm like, that's not true. Like, like cognitive behavioral therapy is not just about your past. It's about building good habits going forward. So I think I think there needs to be a hard look at that in the way that gets trained. And I think that's more of an International Coaching Federation thing. But yeah, so for me, like, the way I deal with it is, hey, like, if I sense it up front, I'm like, hey, do you have a therapist? I will always ask a new client when they onboard, do you have, or have you seen a therapist?
Yeah.
I always ask that question. Too. Yeah. It's part of the intake, and it's good information. And the other thing I guess I'll say about this, and I think you and I are on the same page, is as a coach, I always defer to a therapist. So if there's a therapist somebody's seeing and they're dealing with something that is obviously therapeutic, like anxiety, depression, addiction, or something like that, and they're struggling, be like, hey, like, have you talked to your therapist about this? Actually, I have. Would you mind going and asking your therapist if they think it's a good idea for you to do coaching, to coach with me right now, or have any coach at all? And at the end of the day, if, a therapist, we always defer to the therapist. So that's the way I look at it. And I also think it's a very individual thing that you were trained to look at. And then you just have to, like you said, you just have to trust yourself at the end of the day. And this is just to get on my soapbox, but I know it's your soapbox too. This is why when you see coaches out there who have no training around this, it's actually quite dangerous.
I would agree with that. It's and it's like, I think so much of it is I'm even thinking of people who coach, who do like spiritual coaching, because like bringing in spiritual principles, bringing in, even when we're talking about, because a lot of the work that I do is looking at how you relate to your own emotions and like emotional intelligence, and how you infuse empathy and use that as fuel in like your purpose, and like, don't just shed it, like, let's use it. And inherent in that conversation, like things are going to come up when we're talking about emotional stuff. So, and I'm even just thinking about, there are so many coaches, I think, who dance on this line, and I'm actually probably closer to it than a lot of coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said about deferring to a therapist. And like, if there is any doubt, like deferring to a therapist and being mindful of where, particularly with really intense, like when things come up that are like either very dangerous or life-threatening, or, it's not just like, hey, I feel depressed today. It's like a long span of it or whatever. The piece, therapists, I know so many of them, I have them, I was in grad school with a lot of them, and their training is so deep. And so they're trained to see things and like see those red flags and know how to support people. And like, it's just coaches can get really, really amazing training, but our training is different. So we just need, I think it's important to realize where that line is.
Yeah. And I'll wrap it up with, I just had an example pop into my head. So you have a client who comes to you and says, hey, you know what? I realized it's time for me to repair my relationship with my dad. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, you'd say, what does that look like? What's the plan? How can I support you? And and your client creates a plan around this and then goes nowhere with it. So, hey, like, it looks like you're not getting in the mood. Well, I realized I have some deep seated feelings about this from X, Y, and Z from my childhood or from 5 years ago. This is where you can't coach on top of the therapeutic issue. It doesn't work because that thing, like the human, like, to me, the human psyche that's always going to win out. Like the trauma, the emotion is always going to win out over like, oh, but I've got this plan that I want. Yeah. But the plan on top of, it's a shaky foundation to try and coach on top of, which is again, why we would defer to a therapist. Yeah.
That's a really good example. I think also so much of that is so specific to the client, because it's like, you have to really enable, and this is important as a client to have, like, to really realize this, if you're with a coach, and also as a coach to have your eye on this, is like, there are things that, your trauma will might get activated, particularly because like your trauma is going to get activated when you're getting uncomfortable. Example, I'll use a completely personal example.
Bed bugs, for example. Is that what you're
saying? Bed bugs, for example. But using a personal example, right? I recently realized I was doing this really big corporate workshop, and something got brought up in the room in a very particular way that got me triggered, and it got me more triggered than it normally did. And I was able to navigate it, and it was fine. And the workshop went well, but I got out and I brought it to my therapist, and I was like, the heck was this? Like, what's going on here? Because for me, the level of activation did not match the trigger, which is usually an indicator. Okay, time to bring that to my therapist.
Yeah.
And so the thing we looked at was, okay, like, as a little kid who had a bunch of learning disabilities and yada, yada, like when I was in a big setting like that, and I felt like I was wrong, or I was dumb, or I wasn't smart enough, like that's an old wound, and that's something that needs to be healed. And that's also part of my job. Like, my job is also to go into big workshops and be able to navigate triggers. So I have the therapeutic support. And then from a coaching perspective, there's some mindset work around what's the impact I want to have there. How am I embodying that impact first, and like embodying my mission first and staying connected to that. And then I've also got the therapeutic pieces around managing myself. And there might be a plan around developing my skills as a public speaker. There might be a plan around getting used to putting myself out of my comfort zone and consistently practicing that. And then with my therapist, we're like, okay, what happened when I was 6? Like, what does little Lauren need to know? Like, what do I need to say to her? So it can be both, but the only way I know that is because I'm having conversations with both of them and saying, hey, like, this is what I need here, and this is what I need here. And some coaches might just say, hey, as long as that's happening there, I'm actually going to wait until you're really solid to talk to you about the inner critic stuff that's coming up in workshops. And it's totally, but you just need to be responsible about the boundary. And if the coach starts saying like, tell me about the anxiety. Like, where does this come from? That's therapy. That's not coaching.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap this section by telling you gave me, I'm going to call it the platinum moment that it just totally struck me. The thing about the level of activation is much higher than the trigger should have. Like, that's pure gold. I'm thinking about like my work with my therapist, and almost everything I bring to her is about like, why am I so triggered by these things that I shouldn't be triggered by? Like, that's actually the gap. And that like, that's such gold, Lauren, to think about. Like, it's actually a great way to like bring up things with your, like, what am I going to talk to my therapist about today? Like, hey, what's the things that happened the last week that like shouldn't really be a big thing, that are like, that created a fight with my wife or had me get pissed off or anxious, or like things that should not be a big deal. And again, like there's a should there, like at the end of the day. So thank you for that. That was like really, I'm actually going to ask her about that. And she's like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, you need to be really mindful that it's not coming of like coming from like judgment of the emotion. It's just noticing if it's like, okay, wife said this thing, I ended up not being able to put it down for 5 days. Like, there's something emotionally in your space that like, it's not about judging that emotion, but it's going, okay, it wasn't just about the thing that was said. There's something else happening there that we need to unpack.
Well, I wish you could come up with an example that actually resonated with me, because that never happens to me. If you can come up with a little more specific. Wait, did my wife tell you about this ahead of time? Because this is really resonating for me right now.
I haven't talked to Kristen in a while.
All right. So Lauren, I'm giving you the podcasting host rights here, and I'm going to sit back and become your guest for a question. So what do you want to ask me about that I can answer for you and answer for the audience?
So I wrote down a really cheesy question, but I'm actually really excited about it and really curious.
Great.
What's the single biggest thing that you have learned from Sunny, the adorable golden retriever, since having her?
Like, oh my God. I had a feeling that this is going to be dog related, and I love it, because we just had like this really serious conversation about coaching and therapy. Now we're like, let's talk puppies. Y'all listening knew that this is going to come back to puppies sooner or later. And this is not a planned out question. I had no idea. What's the thing I learned? We all just want to be loved, whether you are a human, most any mammal. And I'm going to give you a specific example of this. Sunny is now 25 pounds, which means she's bigger than our son. And she gets so jealous when Kirsten holds Charlie, our son. And so what she really wants to do is what she wants is for Kirsten to get on the floor and hold her like a baby. And it's gotten so bad that so we have this Bumble Rides running stroller, and it's got like this little compartment underneath it. She climbs into the compartment to ride like a baby. And she's now sleeping in there, and she tries to climb into his bassinet, like the thing that he can sit in the living room and climb into there and like lay there like a baby. It's hilarious. And so the lesson that I've learned is that specific to dogs, I had forgotten, because, we lost our dog. We had a 12-year-old French bulldog. We lost her in October. So she was old for quite a while. And so I'd forgotten what it's like to have a puppy. And I just forgot like how basic that need is for all of us, of like belonging, feeling secure, the jealousy that comes when you don't have those feelings. And I guess the last thing that also is in the realm of that is, all she wants is attention and to be petted and feel safe. And if we give her that, that's it. And like, isn't that what we all really want? We just want to feel safe and feel protected and feel like we each have our own little area of a stroller to go lay under.
Totally. It's like, sometimes I just want my mom to hold me, like, like being held. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the number one lesson, Sunny. I'm actually going to throw when I post our episode on Instagram, I'll put a link in. I'm actually going to tag Sunny Rain in our episode, because this is the first time she's actually been part of an episode, and she's been She's very appreciative. So thank you for the light question. And actually it was light, but also very thoughtful, because I'm like, it's not cheesy. It's a great question to think about. And also I've forgotten how close dogs are actually to human beings.
Yeah.
Like the needs they have and the intelligence and the narcissism.
The narcissism,
the ego.
They're so, yeah. Well, they're, Sachs. So one of our for those of us who are listening, one of our mutual mentors and teachers, who's brilliant, said that dogs are the living, breathing manifestation of our survival mechanisms.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Like,
and so are
perfect.
babies. So are babies too. It's like, it's pure survival mode. There's no, it's pure survival mode. Like, what do I care about? I want to be alive. I want to have comfort, and comfort includes food, drink, being able to go out to the bathroom, and feeling safe in where I'm sleeping, and feeling warm and held. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Thank you, Lauren.
So cute.
Back to you. What are you passionate about?
What am I passionate about?
Besides Harry Potter.
And
can I ask you a question about Harry Potter?
Yes.
What does it say about me that I think I'd want to be in Slytherin?
I know so many people who say that, who are like, they're like, I'm a Slytherin. I'm like, really?
I think they have the coolest colors. That might be part of it. And the reason I bring this up is we are just starting to watch the Harry Potter movies with Hannah, our 5-year-old. We watched the first one. She'd never seen it. And now even today, she's like, when can we watch the next Harry Potter? And I'm like, maybe tonight.
They're so good. They're just so good. Passionate about Harry Potter. I love me some Harry Potter. And there is so much wisdom in those books. So much wisdom.
Oh yeah.
But aside from that, what am I passionate about? Spirituality. I'd say like spirituality, intuition, particularly connecting people with their intuitions and like their internal guidance systems, getting people out of their heads and into their hearts. That would be the most succinct way of putting it.
Yeah. My assertion is you are passionate about that because it's something you had to do for yourself.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. It was, for me, it was the missing link. I done so much work. And that last piece, really, really connecting with myself, listening to my intuition, realizing that my inner guidance was, I don't want to say the most important thing, because that does sound a little bit narcissistic, but like it's the antithesis of that thing that we all do where we like pull the audience. What do you think? And what do you think? And what do you think? And those things are so valuable. But at the end of the day, it's like, what do I think? Like, what should I do? What feels right for me? And learning to stop ignoring that voice, because we're so conditioned to ignore that voice, can just be completely transformative.
Yeah. And what's the difference it's made in your life and making that connection?
I mean, I think from the outside, I'm sure there's some people in my life who would say, wow, she went totally off the rails. I'm kidding a little bit, but because my life completely changed. Like my life changed in such a dramatic way. It didn't go off the rails. Some people from the outside, it might look like some really, really dramatic changes. But initially leaving my job, like this as a PhD in psychology, I had a very well-worn career path. And I think from the outside, shifting looked really frightening. It was, a lot of people were very concerned when I made that decision. Very concerned, as you should be, like, as they should have been. Reasonable humans, who love you will absolutely express concern when you do something like that. And it kind of got me in this habit of just unapologetically, like, saying yes to myself. And so it ended up creating my own job. Now I create my own schedule. I work with people who I adore. I have a happy relationship. Don't get me wrong.
Playing guitar?
You're playing guitar. Playing guitar. It made a huge difference in my life. I have so much more peace now because I'm not fighting with myself,
Yeah, that resonates for me. And I won't get into that today, but absolutely. All right. What else do I want to ask you about, Miss Borden? What's the thing that you are most proud of?
Probably all the stuff I just said.
So the self-work.
Learning to say yes to myself, even when it's scary. I think, I started my practice before I was 30. And that was, I think when you really step away from the life that you know so well, like, that you're not loving it, like you're not in love with it, but it's going to be quote unquote successful. And you go to cocktail parties and talk about it and everyone's like, "Ooh, you're a PhD." Like, their eyes, they get all interested or whatever. And being willing to release that for this kind of unknown but glimmer of possibility for what you really, really want in your life was absolutely terrifying. It was actually scarier than probably anything I've ever done in my life. And I've been through some ish.
Well, and you've also laid in a bed where that there's bed bugs. So that's pretty scary for most people. You bring it back to Sunny Rain, the puppy. I bring it back to the bed bug story because that still blows my mind.
Yeah. Sunny. I'll always bring it back to Sunny.
Always bring it back to Sunny. Cool. So what's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
That I am an entitled millennial. The accusation that I'm an entitled millennial is true. And it kind of is. Like, it also kind of is true. I think the word entitled, I hate the word entitled, but I would say that a lot of the work that I know you do as well, but we do, is empowering people to have the audacity to go after the stuff that they really want. And a lot of people, that's idealistic. It's idealistic in a lot of ways. And a lot of people actually sometimes people don't have the privilege to do that, or like they feel like they don't have the privilege. And I think a lot of previous generations wouldn't have felt privileged enough to do that. Totally. So I totally recognize that it's a privilege. And simultaneously, when I hear it or when I really address it, I'm like, ooh, I am totally one of those millennials. Yeah, I'd say that's it.
Yeah. Well, surprise. I have a second part of this question for you that you don't know. What do you do to compensate for this fear?
Ooh, I talk about, I lean very hard into gratitude and recognizing privilege. Perfect. And like really try to own that, really try to own that. I also I emphasize, I'm sure you've noticed this in the way that I talk about it. I'm like, but I work really hard. Like I do work really hard. And like, I try to do my due diligence to minimize the impact of my privilege. Yeah.
Yep. I had a guest who was like, I don't know. I don't think I do anything to compensate for that. And I'm like, I think you may want to take a little bit deeper look at yourself here. Do you understand how humans are built? You're like, you're definitely compensating for that thing. And it's not about them specifically. It's just like, this is how we're built, right? Like, oh my God, is this true about me? Is this true about Jason? Is this true about Lauren? Oh, what can I do to prove it to myself that is not true? Because I'm so damn scared that it is true. Mm-hmm. It's actually really funny too, when I ask this question of every single guest, and the thing that most people are afraid of is the thing that actually most of the time is true about them in some way, shape, or form. Like it actually is, like, you can almost say factually true. Like if you look at what you said, you actually are a millennial. Like entitled is a judgment, but you actually are a millennial. So your half of what you said is categorically true.
For sure. Yeah. And it does take a quality, like it takes an element, like it did take entitlement for me to say, hey, I have this life that's really good and really solid, and no, it's not enough.
Yeah.
That was entitled as hell. And yeah, that was entitled as hell. So
there you go. Here we are. All good.
Here we are.
How do you see the world, Lauren?
You're talking to a philosophy major, so
I know. This is fantastic.
Float off into the sky. Initially, when I was thinking about this, the thing that came up for me was like, there's a lot of pain, but a lot of love here. But I think broadly, the way that I think of, I try to think of life as, regardless of what experience comes up, I really try to use the lens of like, what is this thing trying to teach me? if this were something like, no matter how bleak or awful, like if this were something that the universe was kind of just delivering to me as this perfect package to give me exactly what I need in this moment, what is that thing? It's just my job to find that thing, to survive it and find that thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's how I think about it for myself,
Amazing.
at least.
Yeah. All right. I'd love to talk for another 3 hours.
We could.
And I will, with your permit, well, not with your permission, but I would like to invite you to come back again sometime soon in the next year, and we'll see how you're doing, because I'm going to start to bring back guests. And I haven't released this episode yet, so it might make sense to release your first episode before I bring you back for a second one. Like there's a ton of topics here we could go deeper into. And with that, we're going to start to wrap up. So I'd love if you would share with the audience how they can all find you. Like, how can people connect with Lauren, and knowing that everything you're going to share, they don't have to be jotting it down and furiously scribbling. I will put this all in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So Lauren, how can people connect with you? How can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Lauren Borden. I'm also on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Dr. Lauren Borden, I think, right? Yeah, no, I just changed it. It used to be Lauren Borden Coaching, and then I changed it because I was trying to make it shorter. But and my website is laurenbordencoaching.com. So you can check me out there. You can send me a message. I'd love to meet you. That's the gist of it.
Yeah, I have a question for you. This is an opinion question. You and I both use our names in our businesses, and other coaches have their own, like they come up with a company name or such. I don't think there's any right or wrong to this. I think it's really a personal preference. What was your thought process behind just using your name as your business?
You want to know the honest answer?
Of course I do. You didn't know, you couldn't come up with anything else?
I'm like, this is not the like polished, like executive presence answer. This is when I was basically, when I was starting my business, I was late creating an LLC. And I needed an LLC to create a business bank account. And I was trying to do it fast. And I kept thinking, what do I want to call my business? And then getting stuck. And I just said, oh, screw it. I'll just do. And that's just what I went with. And so at some point it might.
Powerful brand strategy. Oh, screw it. I'll just go with this.
This is actually what I'm talking about when it's like branding and marketing is out of your comfort zone. I'm going to get a million branding and marketing experts reaching out to me after this, but I've managed to grow my business in a very different way. I've thought about different names. I've thought about like using something like Valkyrie Coaching or Virago Coaching, or I don't know. And at one point I was thinking of buying a domain name like that was totally different. At some point it might shift, but
yeah.
It was simple. I also wanted people to just be able, like, actually part of the at least the URL, right? When I got my website together, it was just that I knew that people would know, like it would be associated with my name. Like this is the coach. And I just wanted to be able to pop up. That was
There's a gentleman named Mike Kim that I know, a future podcast guest. He's a branding guy. He strongly recommends that you just use your name because it's just memorable. It's easy. Like, oh, I met this really cool person at a networking event. Well, oh, her name is Lauren. Oh, here's her card, Lauren, versus like Virago, like we said, Virago Coaching. Like, hey, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. And at the same time, it's like, it's not memorable. I'm not going to remember like Virago, but I remember, oh, her name is Lauren. Oh, Lauren Borden. Oh, Lauren Borden. Oh, so her coaching website, type in Google Lauren Borden, and there you are. There's your website. Exactly. I'm not saying that he's the be all end all, but that is what he recommends.
Yeah. The more evolved response to your question would have just been simplicity. That actually would have been.
You should have been like, well, I sat down with a brand strategist, and over the space of 25 hours, we hashed out on a board, and then I just decided that this was the thing I wanted. But you're like, I procrastinated on my LLC. I really need to do it, and I said, screw it. I used the thing that I knew was very easy.
One of my core values is authenticity. Here I am, everyone.
That's why I love you, because this is great. Here we go. This is Lauren's available for brand strategy anytime you want. Should be like, what's the thing that has you say, oh, screw it, I'm just going to do this? That's the thing you should go with.
That's the thing you should go with. But it's also useful, right? I have so many clients who are like, I can't do this until I have the perfect that. And I'm like,
oh, totally.
No, No,
Right.
like just do it. It was a just do it moment.
Yeah.
So
For anybody who's a coach who's out there listening, coach, consultant, nobody's going to be like, I think they're great, but their name of their company that actually means nothing, like Valkyrie, like nobody's going to be like, I love Lauren, but it's not Valkyrie coaching. So that's really giving me pause. Like nobody's like, I can't imagine ever having that be a decision point one way or another. It's not like you're selling like Apple computers or Xerox machines or like Rice Krispies. Like you're not, it's like, it's just what it is. It's literally Lauren Borden coaching.
That's it. Well, and certain people might. And I'm kind of like, if you that's your thing, then you probably would be better off with a different coach. That's
right.
Fine.
Yeah. And I'll sometimes you see these names. I'm like, that's really obtuse. I don't know what that means. Like, it's very like what it is. Also sounds extremely corporate, which is, I don't think is the vibe that you want. Like you have a lot of corporate experience and you work with a lot of people in corporate. I do too, but like, I don't want the corporate vibe of like, optimal results group, LLC. Like
that's probably a thing.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And I'm sure they do really well for the right people. So
All
right, Lauren, last thing for you. Tradition on the show is words of wisdom. So what do you got for me and for the audience that you could fit on a Post-it note? What do you want to leave us with? Just do it. Screw it. Just do it.
Just do it. No, just do the damn thing. No. I was thinking about this and I had a bunch of ideas, but I think the thing I often come back to is, you can't change the world by being a carbon copy of it.
I want to ask you so many questions, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just let that sit there because I need to actually think about what that means. All right, Lauren, thank you so much for being on. Happy Friday. I'm glad we finally made this happen. Can't wait for the audience to get to hear you, experience your greatness like I've gotten to know you. And I wish you the very best in everything you're doing, especially, and I'm going to say this, I'm a guitar player. So I'm literally been looking at Lauren for the last hour and almost a half now. And I'm looking at the headstock of your guitar and I'm like, it's very inspiring. So good luck with your guitar playing on top of everything else. And I see it's an electric, which makes me very happy.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I've also there's an acoustic to my right, but it's not mine. So, all
right, Lauren, thank you so much.
Okay. See you, Jason.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.